I mean, everyone's, thank God, is okay. Okay, let's get started. We're on DAF Yud Tes Amud Aleph in KIDDUSHIN, and we're talking about the mitzvah of Yiyud, which is the way that in Amma HaIvriya, a Jewish Yud Tes Amud Aleph, a Jewish slave girl or Jewish servant, one of the options that the master has before she reaches the age of 12 years old, is to either marry her himself or marry her off to his son. And so the question that the Gemara is going to ask now, it's the sixth line in the Gemara, Boi Reish Lakish, Mahu Shemiyayid Adam Livno Katan. Can a man marry off this Amma to his son if his son is a minor? So not a coal miner, but a child, yeah. But so yeah,
coal miner's daughter.
Right. So anyway, so Bino Amar Rachmana Bino Koldu Odilma Bino Dum Yadidei. So do you say that it's the Torah says his son, and his son is unconditional, so it could be either an adult son or a minor son? Or maybe no. Maybe it has to be his son, since the Torah says, connects his son to himself, then just like he is an adult, so too his son must be an adult. So Mahu Gadol Af Beno Gadol. So Amar Reb Zera Tashma. So Reb Zera says, come and listen. Ish Prat Lekatan, Asher Yinafis Eishas Ish Prat Leishas Katan. The Gemara makes a drasha elsewhere dealing with the laws of adultery. The Torah says that the punishment for adultery is capital punishment. However, we exclude two situations. One is where the male adulterer is a minor, and the other one is where the husband of the adulteress is a minor. That's excluded based on the psukim where it says ish, to exclude where the adulterer is a minor. The word ish means a man, not a child. And eshes ish, the wife of a man, means that the adulteress's husband has to be an adult and not a minor. So the Gemara says, "V'yamart miyayid im kein matzinu ishus lakatan." So the Gemara's point is that if you're telling me that it's possible to have yiyud with a minor son, then why shouldn't there be capital punishment? The Torah is telling you there's no capital punishment in this case. Why not? She's legally married in a situation where she's an Amma who's married to an 11-year-old boy. That's a legal marriage. Why shouldn't there be capital punishment? So the Gemara says, "Ve'elamai eno miyayid, amai kamamoid leikra." But the Gemara says, but what's your alternative? Your alternative is to tell me you're right. There is no legal marriage with a minor son in the case of an Amma. So then what are you telling me? That there's no possibility of a minor boy being married to a girl? If that's the case, then why does the Torah have to exclude the capital punishment in the first place? If such a marriage is not even possible, then why does the Torah have to tell me that if you commit adultery in a marriage of minors, there's no death penalty? There is no marriage of minors, so the Torah doesn't even have to address it. So the Gemara says, therefore, tifshot mina debiyayid. If anything, we should be able to adduce from this pasuk, which specifically excludes the death penalty from adultery with a minor marriage, that minor marriage is possible. That's what you should be able to infer. So the Gemara says, so therefore we want to be able to prove from here that yiyud is possible with a minor boy. So Amar Rav Ashi hacha biyavim ben teisha shanim v'yom echad habal yivimto askinan demidiraisa chazyalei mahu detema kevin demidiraisa chazyalei biyaso bi abal lehach mischayiv beishas ish. So the Gemara says no. It's altogether possible that there is no possibility of yiyud with a minor son. Why then does the Torah have to preclude the death penalty from a minor marriage? Because there's another possibility of minor marriage. Not the case of yiyud, but rather the case of yibum. See, normally marriage has to be performed by an adult male over the age of bar mitzvah. But we can give you an example of marriage that can be done by a minor, and that's yibum. will be derived in the Gemara and Yavamas, that as long as the child is physically capable of bia, even though he's not a minor, since the Torah had already pre-designated a connection between the Yavam and the Yavama, his bia is a valid bia to consummate a marriage, even though normally marriage cannot take place with a minor. So therefore, maybe that's what the Torah is telling me, is that even though through Yibum a minor marriage can take place, and you might therefore think that if a man commits adultery with the Yavama who's done Yibum with a minor child, therefore there should be a death penalty, Kamash Malan, that there's no death penalty. Now, the Gemara doesn't explain why there's no death penalty, even though it's a completely legal marriage, but it's a Gezeirus HaKasav. That's what we would infer. But we don't have any proof one way or the other whether Yiyud is possible with a minor son at this point. So my Havi Allah. So therefore, the question is: so what was the upshot? What's the conclusion on this question? So Tashma Amar Rabbi Aibo Amar Rabbi Yanai Ein Yiyud Ela Begadol Ein Yiyud Ela Midas. He quotes Rabbi Yanai as saying that Yiyud can only be done with an adult child, with an adult son, and it can only be done with das, with knowledge, which also precludes a minor. So tarte. So the Gemara says, why do you have to make both statements? Isn't that like a tautology? You're just repeating the same thing. So the Gemara says, no. Ma tam kamer, ma tam ein yid ela begadol, lefi she'ein yid ela midas. The answer is, we're explaining why. You know why a minor son cannot have yid? Because he doesn't have das. And yid can only be done with das, just like any other marriage. But the Gemara now says another reason. V'ibois ema mai midas, midas dida. A whole new explanation that yiyud needs to be done with the knowledge of the girl. Now, what does that mean? As we're going to explain, when a father marries off, and again, putting aside all sensibilities of the modern age, when a father sells his daughter into servitude, he basically is giving the master the option to unilaterally decide whether he wants to just run out the clock of the years of servitude, right? Or he can marry her in the middle of that period of servitude, and then she's now a married woman instead of being an Amma Ha'ivriya. And it's unilateral. In other words, she doesn't get any say in the matter. She can't say, I don't want to be married. That's basically the father's option, just like a father can marry off a daughter without her say in the matter. Now, Chazal said you shouldn't do it if she doesn't want to, and there's many Gemaras that talk about that, but we're talking about biblically now. Now, in this situation, however, what we're learning here is that even though she doesn't have to consent, she at least has to be cognizant, meaning that there can be no act of yiyud without her awareness that the yiyud is taking place. And why is this necessary? As we'll see in just a moment. Tani Abaya Berei de Rebbe Avahu, Asher lo ya'ada, Melamid shetzarech liya'ada. The pasuk says if a man chooses not to do yiyud, she goes free when she's a nara. But the word lo could also be read as lamed vav, that if he does yiyud to her, and the word ya'ada, like Rashi says, comes from the word de'ah, which teaches me that a man is obligated to inform the girl that he has chosen to marry her. Hu tani la v'hu amar la, and he quoted this price and he explained it. B'kiddushe yud v'aliba de Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda. This is talking about when you marry a girl through yud, and we're going according to Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda, which we saw cited yesterday very briefly. We're going to elaborate upon Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda today. He says, "Da Amar Ma'os Harishanos Lav LeKiddushin Nitnu." He says that the original money that was used to purchase this girl as an Amma Ha'ivriya were not given for the purpose of Kiddushin. Now let's be very clear about what this means. We're going to see the Gemara speaking this out explicitly in just a minute. When a man acquires an Amma Ha'ivriya and he has the option to marry her at any point, what is the mechanism whereby he marries her? Now Rashi told us yesterday that all a man has to say to her is, Harei at Yehuda li bekesef miknasayich. You are hereby miyuad, which means the special form of marriage, to me through the money of your purchase. So the question is, what is the mechanism? How is it working? There's two ways of understanding it. It works either based on the fact that when the master, presented the money to the father, this money was presented for dual purposes, either for servitude or for marriage, and therefore retroactively, once the man says, I want this money to be activated for marriage, retroactively the girl is married to him through the kesef that he used to pay. But there's another way of looking at it, and this is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's way of looking at it. He looks at it, no, it's not a retroactive process. When a girl is sold to slavery, let's say she's 10 years old, so there's 2 years for her to serve out her slavery. The Adon paid $1,000 for that privilege of having her as his slave. A year elapses, and he says, okay, there's $500 left on your contract for the coming year from the age 11 to 12. For that forgiveness of that $500 worth of servitude, I'm giving that to you figuratively. I'm giving that to you. I'm forgiving it. And with that forgiveness, you are hereby married to me.
For how long?
For how long what?
What do you mean?
Married till Yovel? Till forever?
Yeah.
A marriage is always permanent until divorce or death.
$500 in this case. That's
No.
tremendous.
You can marry a girl for a pruta. It's
Not the value, I'm saying the value, not...
No. I'm saying there's $500 left on her contract until she becomes a nara, until she automatically goes free. But he's basically saying whatever is left on your servitude contract until you become a nara, there's a dollar amount of how much I paid versus prorated to how much time is left on in your servitude. That money I want to use towards being makadesh. As long as it's a shava pruta, he can be makadesher with that. Just like you can be makadesh with a milva. You can be makadesh a woman with a debt, say, I forgive a debt.
Right.
This is like forgiveness of a debt.
You
owe me.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that she's married for how long is she married? Forever?
It's a regular marriage.
Till she ages out?
No, it's a regular marriage. She's permanently married. That's what yiyud is. It's a marriage. There's no such thing as a temporary marriage in Jewish law, regardless of whether it's done through yiyud or kiddushin. Marriage is marriage. There's no such thing as a marriage that expires at a certain time, right? So this is what, according to Rabbi Yossi, this is the way the marriage works, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, she has to be notified of it. She doesn't need to consent because she's a minor, but she has to be notified because the process is being done with her, not with the father. And that's the reason why we're saying that this goes according to Rabbi Yossi. It has to be done with her knowledge. So the Gemara now says...
If she's a minor, can there be miyun?
No. Miyun only works when there's not a non-biblical marriage. Miyun is when marriage from the Bible does not work, such as when she's an orphan. That's the only time that miyun works. So let's not get confused. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Afilu tema l'kiddushin nitnu, shayni hacha da Amar Rachmana ya'ada. Now, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak disagrees. He says you don't have to say that this halacha, that a girl has to know about the yiyud, is only according to Rabbi Yossi. Even according to the Chachamim who say that when the Adon paid for the girl, he had in mind that this money could be used for marriage, and that's the mechanism that causes the yiyud to apply. You could still say, well, then you don't need for her to know about it because the money was already paid to the father. No. Rav Nachman says, the pasuk says, Asher lo ya'ada, that extra word ya'ada teaches me from the word de'ah, from the word knowledge, teaches me that regardless of the fact that I gave the money to your father already, I am obligated by the Torah to notify you. That's what the word ya'ada implies, that the girl herself has to be notified. Now, normally a girl under the age of 12 has no das, but here's a special gzeras hakasov that even though she has no das for the purposes of kinyanim, she still has to be notified and made to understand that she is being married now at this point. Anyway, the bottom line is, we have this idea that the Gemara is now presented to us, that when you do yiyud, the girl that is being married has to be notified. So the Gemara says, what is this my Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda? Now let's explain what the origin of this opinion is. The Tanya, Ya'ada vehefta, tzarech sheyehi shahus b'yom kidei pidiya. Mikan Omer Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda im yeshos b'yom kedei lasos imo shavapruta mekudeshes v'im lav eina mekudeshes. So the words, the two verbs, ya'ada, which is yud, and hefta, to redeem herself, are adjacent to each other in the pasuk. That tells me that the only time yud is possible is if the girl can still has time to redeem herself. Now, what does it mean to redeem herself? What did we say? If a girl is, or any Eved Ivri, has the opportunity before the period of servitude is over to pay for the amount left on their service contract and to purchase their freedom. But so what the word hefda means is that as long as the Amma Ha'ivriya still has a monetary value left on her contract to buy her freedom, then yiyud is possible. If the time has expired, so that there's not even a shava pruta left on her contract, so then yiyud is not possible. And that's why Rabbi Yossi says, if let's say she's about to become 12 years old, and there's only, let's say, 30 seconds left on her service contract, there's no shava pruta left in her service contract, the man can no longer do yiyud. There has to be at least the shava pruta of work that she can still perform. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi holds that the mechanism of yiyud is the value that the master is forgiving on her service contract and giving to her. If there's no value left on that service contract, so then he can't do yiyud. The yiyud is not possible.
He can't use other independent money.
No, yiyud is a special case of marriage. He has to use the mechanism that is prescribed by the Torah. Right, so Alma Kesavar Mos Harishonos Lav LeKiddushin. So you see that according to Rabbi Yossi, it's not the original money that he paid to the girl's father that is the mechanism for Kiddushin. That was not given for Kiddushin. It is the forgiveness of the debt on the service contract that creates the Kiddushin. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Afilu Tema LeKiddushin Nidnu Shaini Hacha Da'amar Rachmana Vehefta. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, I disagree. I hold that even according to the Chachamim, who hold that it's the man's money that he gave to the father, there still has to be time for her to redeem herself in order for the man to do yiyud, based on just the Gzeras HaKosav, the Omer Rachmana Ve'efta, just the adjacency of the two words. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak learns that even the Chachamim would agree with that. Omer Rava, Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Adam Labito Ktana, Tzvi v'kibli Kiddushayach mid Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda. So Rava, in the name of Rav Nachman, wants to make two halachic inferences from Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda's halacha. Number one, he can say to his daughter, now we're not talking about an Amma Ha'ivriya, we're talking about a man speaking to his daughter. He says, daughter, I'm going to marry you off, but I don't want to leave the house to accept the Kiddushin money from your suitor. You go ahead and pick up the money yourself, and by you accepting the money, you will thereby be Mekudeshes. Now normally, a minor girl doesn't have das to be able to do this. However, we see from Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda's halacha that as long as the father has control in the first stage over her marriage or over her servitude, as long as she's notified of the marriage, then that marriage works. Lav Omer Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, Mos Harishonos Lav LeKiddushin Nitnu, V'chi Meshayer B'Shava Pruta B'Kiddushay Hachana Miloshna. As long as you see from the case of Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda that as long as the girl is notified that there's a monetary value that is being presented to her in exchange for marriage, that works. So too over here. Even if the father is not even aware that at what stage of this process the daughter is going to receive the money, as long as he gives her permission to receive money from her suitor in exchange for marriage, that's a valid marriage, even though she's a ketana. Now, v'Omer Rav Nachman hamakadesh b'milva sheyesh alei hamashkon mikudesh b'Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda. And another chiddush, he says, that we can infer from Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda. We learned before that a makadesh b'milva, that a man who wants to be makadesh a woman by forgiving a debt, that's a valid kiddushin, even though he's not giving her anything physical right now, but he's forgiving a debt. There's an even bigger chiddush over here, which is that if you forgive a debt that where there was collateral presented. Let's say a man lends a woman $1,000, but he says, I need collateral. So she gives him her silver candlesticks, right? And then he says, you know what? I'm going to forgive the debt and not require you to pay the $1,000, but I'm going to keep the candlesticks nonetheless. But with the forgiveness of the debt, I hereby want to be Makadesh you. As long as she accepts, that's a valid Kiddushin. Even though you could argue that he hasn't really presented her anything of value because he's got her candlesticks, nevertheless, the very act of forgiveness of the debt is an act of Kiddushin. And how can we infer this? From Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda. Because Lav Omer Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda, Mos HaRishonos Lav LeKiddushin Nitnu. Hai Halva'ahi, V'hi Gufa Mashkoni, V'chi Meshayer Bashavar Pruta, Miyayid Habi Kiddushin, Achanami Loshna. So the Gemara's argument is as follows. What is Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda's whole din? He's basically saying to a girl who's already his servant, he's saying to her as follows. You are the collateral. You're the collateral, in other words, I own you, or you're in my possession temporarily, until you work off the debt that you owe based on the purchase that I purchased you for. I purchased you for $1,000. So you need to work up until the age of 12 in order to work off what I paid to your father. We can look at that almost like a loan, right? And you've got to work it off. So basically I'm saying, okay, you don't have to work it off anymore, but what was the collateral on the payment? You're the collateral. So I'm taking you as my wife, I'm taking the collateral, and I'm forgiving the work debt that you owe, so I'm forgiving the loan, in a sense. So as long as there's a shava pruta left on this work contract, and I forgive it, it's comparable to a case of where a man says, I'm forgiving the loan and keeping the candlesticks. I'm forgiving your servitude debt to me, and I'm keeping you as my wife. So it's the same principle, even though one could argue that there are certain distinctions, the Gemara says it's comparable enough to say that that works. Tanu Rabbanan, Ketzad Ma'os Yud. So now the question is like this. Ketzad Mitzvah Yud, how do you do the mitzvah of Yud? So Omer La Bifnei Shnayim, Hareat Miyuedesli, Hareat Mikudeshesli. That's the Bach's Girsa. He says, if a man either says, you are hereby miyuad to me, or you are mikudeshes to me, either statement, either verb will work. As long as you said it in front of two witnesses, that's the act of yud. Afilu bisof sheish va'afilu samach lishkia sachama. And you can do this at the very end of the 6 years. In other words, if there's a 6-year contract for this Amma ha'ivriya, let's say you purchased her when she was, let's say, 6 years old. And even if it's right before Shkia Sachama, there's like 5 seconds left on her contract, right? V'noheg ba minhag ishus, ve'ein noheg ba minhag shivchas. And from that point forward, you have to treat her as your wife and not as your shivcha. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im yesh shahus b'yom kidei lasos imo shava pruta mikudeshes, v'im lav eina mikudeshes. And Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it can't be mamish 5 seconds before. It has to be at least enough time left on her service contract such that that service contract is still worth a shava pruta. If you don't have that time left on the service contract, you can't marry her. Now, again, this is consistent with what we learned before. But then the Brisa says, Mashal la'omer li'isha hiskadshili me'achshav la'achar shloshim yom, u'bo acher v'kid shebesoch shloshim yom shemekudeshes l'rishon. The Brisa concludes with saying, from this we may infer, that's what the word mashal means over here, says Rashi, we can infer from what we've discussed as far as yud to the following case. That if a man says to a woman, you are hereby married to me me'achshav, from now, and after 30 days I want it to be activated. In other words, I'm giving you this money now, I want it to work from now but not until 30 days, which is a little bit of a contradiction, but it means he wants it to work retroactively from now, but not only to take effect 30 days. 30 days from now there'll be a retroactive marriage. So the halacha is that if during that 30-day interim period another man were to present her with kiddushin, that would not work. She would once the 30-day mark hits, she's retroactively married to the first guy. And basically the Brisa says you can infer that from this law of Yud. So the Gemara is a little bit puzzled. Mashal Laman, according to whom can you make this inference? Ilay mamashal Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda ha'im yeshos b'yam kedei lasus imo shavar pruta mikudeshes v'im lav lo. He says, you can't be telling me that you're comparing this to the Rabbi Yossi's view of how Yiyud works, because he says it only works mikanu lahaba. He doesn't use the principle of retroactivity to explain how the mechanism of Yiyud works. He says that you're being makadesh her with the remainder on the service contract, which is basically saying from this point forwards you are married to me. So therefore you have to conclude Amar Ravacha Berei Rava Mashal Rabbanan. You have to conclude like Ravacha says that we're making the inference from the way that the Chachamim view the mitzvah of Yiyud, which basically is that it's whenever the Adon decides to marry her, he basically is saying that using the money that I gave to your father, retroactively, I want that to be a marriage from the time that I gave the money to your father. And since you see that retroactive marriage works, similarly, you can infer from the Chachamim's view of Yiyud that any kind of retroactive marriage works, such that if another suitor tries to give her kiddushin during that interim period, then his kiddushin will not work. That's all we're trying to infer. So the Gemara says, Pshita. Well, now that you've explained it in the terms of the Chachamim, that seems to be fairly obvious. Why do you even need to state it? So, Mahu detei mahalo amrle me'achshav kamash malon. The Gemara says, I'll tell you the Chiddush. The Chiddush is that when I, as the master, presented this girl's father with Kiddushin, I did not state explicitly that the marriage should work me'achshav, that the Yiyud should take place me'achshav, retroactively. So you might have argued that in a case of Yiyud, it's not a retroactive marriage, but rather it only applies from the time that I say Hareyat miyu edesli, and therefore if in theory someone else would try to marry her, the marriage of the second guy would supplant my ability to do Yiyud. So Kamash Malan, that no, that it's implicit. Every time a man purchases an Amah Ivriya, according to the Chachamim, it's implicit that when he presents the cash for the girl, he's doing a retroactive marriage should he exercise that option. So Tanya Idach, now we have another brisa. Hamocher is bito v'holach v'kid shela acher sichek ba'adon mikudeshes l'sheni divrei Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda. It's in a related brisa. A man sells his daughter into servitude as an Amah Ivriya, and while she's working, he goes ahead and accepts kiddushin from another suitor to marry off his daughter. So even though normally the Adon has the option of marrying her, but since he was preempted by this other guy, this other suitor, she's halachically married to the other suitor as soon as she serves out her time as an Amah Ivriya. And therefore he's basically deceiving, that's what sichek means, he's playing games with the Adon who purchased her, who thought that he had the option to marry her at some point. He's lost that option because of the father's exercising his option. V'chachamim omrim imratze liyayid miyayid. And the Chachamim disagree. The Chachamim say that no, whenever the Adon wants to do Yiyud, he can do Yiyud because it works retroactively and therefore preempts retroactively the Kiddushin of the second suitor. So, Mashallah Omer Leisha Hareyat Mikudeshes Li La'achar Shloshim Yom Uba Acher V'Kid Shebesoch Shloshim Yom Shemikudeshes L'Sheni. And from this we may infer that if a man says to a woman, you are hereby mikudeshes to me, but I only want it to work, I only want it to take effect after 30 days from now, then if a second suitor comes and presents her with kiddushin before that time, she's married to the second guy, not to the first guy. Why? Because in this case, the guy who presented her with kiddushin did not say the word may achshav. So therefore, it doesn't work retroactively. So the Gemara is now saying, okay, so you're saying that a non-retroactive marriage, that you only want to take effect in 30 days from now, can be preempted by another guy. So, and you're inferring that from the law of Yiyud, mashal laman. Which opinion of Yiyud are you inferring it from? Ilay mala rabbanan hamri rabbanan imratze liyayid miyayid. It can't be like the Chachamim, because according to the Chachamim, it works retroactively Yiyud. So how can you say that a second suitor can preempt the Yiyud? Or a second suitor can preempt the delayed marriage? According to the Chachamim, you can't infer that from Yiyud, because Yiyud works retroactively according to the Chachamim. So Amar Ravacha Berei de Rava, Mashal Rabbi Yossi Berei Yehuda. So Ravacha says again, no, this Bryce is making the inference from Yossi Berei Yehuda's opinion, who said that it works only mikanu lahaba, that it works not non-retroactively, that whenever the Adon wants to marry her, he uses the time remaining and the money remaining on her service contract to be Makadesh her from this point forward. And that's the same thing as basically saying that I have the option to marry this girl 30 days from now, but up until then, she's on the free market. So the Gemara says, Pshita. So isn't that obvious? Obviously, according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, there's no retroactivity. So why are you making this inference if it's so obvious? The Gemara says, Mahu detema ha lo amar lo la'achar shloshim yom kamash malan. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what the chiddush is. When you give them the father the cash for the purchase of the Amma Ha'ivriya, at no point do you ever stipulate with the father that by a certain time I will do yiyud to your daughter. So you might have thought that in a case of yiyud, the law is completely different, and if a second suitor were to come along, then who knows? All bets are off. Maybe in that situation, the Adon has so much power that he could preempt it, or he could stop it from happening, because you're not saying anything. So the chiddush is that no, it's exactly comparable to a case of where a man presents a woman kiddushin but says that it's not going to take effect until 30 days from now. Just like over there, a second guy could preempt it by giving her kiddushin before the 30 days, so too by an Amma Ha'ivriya, since the Adon has not done yiyud, even though he's already given the cash, a second guy could preempt by giving the father kiddushin for the girl and preempt the Adon. Tanya idach. Now we have another brisa. Hamocher is bita upasak almana shelo liyaed niskaim hatanai diver Reb Meir. Now let's say a man sells his daughter into servitude, but on the condition that you're not going to do yiyud with my daughter. I'm only going to let her work straight as an amma, but no yiyud is possible. I want her back, and I want an option to marry her off to another person whenever I have the opportunity to do so. Reb Meir says that's fine, and it's a valid condition. The Chachamim omrim imratza liyaid miyaid mipnei shehisnal mashakasav b'Torah v'chol hamasnal mashakasav b'Torah tano batal. And the Chachamim disagree. You want to purchase an Amma Ha'ivriya, or you want to sell your daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya, and you want to void a stipulation that's explicit in the Torah. You can't do that. If you go through a mechanism that the Torah prescribes, and you try to circumvent the details of that mechanism, those attempted circumventions are null and void, and the daughter is sold as an Amma Ha'ivriya, and if the Adon wants to do yiyud with her, he has the option to do that. You can't stipulate something that goes against the Torah's prescribed method. So now the question is, we understand the Chachamim, but how can you tell me that Ula Reb Meir Tano Chaim? How can you tell me that according to Reb Meir, the stipulation is valid? The Hatanya ha'omer leisha arei mekudeshes li'almanas she'en lach alai sher ksus va'ona harezu mekudeshes v'tano batul diver Reb Meir. Reb Meir seems to subscribe to this idea that if you're mastel mashakasa b'Torah, you try to countermand the Torah's prescribed method, then your tanai is batul, then your stipulation is null and void. Here's the example. A man presents a woman with kiddushin, but he says, I want you to be my wife on the condition that I don't have to provide you with clothing, with shelter, and with conjugal duty. Right? Which are the three things that the Torah requires a husband to provide. That's the definition of marriage. So according to Reb Meir, she's married, and his stipulation is null and void. So you see here that Rabbi Meir voids any stipulation that goes against the Torah. Why does he validate the stipulation in the case of an Amma Ha'ivriya? And Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'davar sheb'mamon tano kayim. And Rabbi Yehuda says, I disagree. He says, when it comes to the financial responsibilities of a husband, as long as they're two consenting adults that consent to whatever financial agreement, that financial agreement is binding. So if the woman says, you know what, you don't have to provide me with clothes. I'm a rich girl, I have plenty of clothes. That's fine. It's still a valid marriage. It's the only thing that Rabbi Yehuda says that the stipulation is void is when it comes to conjugal duty, because that's a non-financial issue, that's a physical intimacy issue, and that's part of the stipulation of marriage that cannot be compromised. But the bottom line is that we have a steer in Rabbi Meir. In the previous brisa, Rabbi Meir says, you can make a stipulation that goes against the laws of Amma Ha'ivriya. And over here, Reb Meir says if you try to make a stipulation that goes against the laws of marriage, the stipulation is null and void. So why is that? So Amar Chizki, Yashani Hacha, Da Amar Kra La Amma. Pa'amim she'eno mochra elo la'ama bilvad. The answer is because the Torah uses an extra word le'ama to sell a daughter as an ama, as a servant. The fact that it writes it at an extraneous time teaches me that there are times when a father has the option to sell his daughter exclusively for servitude without the option of marriage. It's based on Gzeras HaKasav. And therefore you're not masnal mashakasav b'Torah, you're not countermanding the Torah, because the Torah creates an allowance for this according to Rabbi Meir. V'rabbanan hay la'ama may avdilei. So now the question is, what do the Chachamim do with that word la'ama? If they say that that's voiding a stipulation, avoiding one of the Torah's conditions, then obviously they use the word la'ama for something different. What do they use it for? Mi boy luhu l'chidetanya la'ama milamed shemocher lapsulim. The word la'ama teaches me that you can sell your daughter into servitude even if the man that purchases her is not allowed to, by the Torah, to marry her because, let's say, there's an Isser Lo Saseh. Let's say the girl is a mamzer or the Adon is a mamzer and they're not allowed to get married. So even though they're not allowed to get married, but since marriage is still possible, there's tfisas kiddushin, even though you'd have to violate the Torah, nevertheless, that marriage is valid. V'halo dinu, im mekadsha lapsulim lo yimkarena lapsulim. But the Gemara says, why do you need a pasuk to tell me that? After all, a father has the option to marrying off his daughter, even to someone who's usher to her according to the Torah. As long as there's valid marriage, a father can do that. He's violating the Torah by doing that, but he still has that option. So if he can marry her off, then why can't he sell her? So malav mekadsha lapsulim sheken adam mekadesh esbito kishehinara yimkarena lapsulim she'en adam mocher esbito kishehinara. But then I'll give you a counter argument. Maybe the father's purview over his daughter's marriage is of greater scope than the purview of a father selling his daughter into servitude, because a father can can marry off his daughter from the age of 12 to 12 and a half when she's a naira, which he's not allowed to do as far as selling her into servitude. So just because he can marry off his daughter to a person who's puzzled, let's say to a mamzer, does not automatically indicate that he could sell her into servitude to a mamzer, because you see that the scope of rights that he has of marrying his daughter are greater. So maybe just like they're greater as far as age, they're also greater as far as the scope of people that he's allowed to marry her to. And therefore you need a pasuk to tell me. Therefore, Talmud Lomar la'ama malamid shemocher lapsulim. This therefore teaches me that you're allowed to sell your daughter even to a man that the Torah says you should not marry. Now Rabbi Eliezer Omer imulamid shemocher lapsulan arei kvar nemar im ra'a be'enei adoneha shera'a b'nisu'eha. So Rabbi Eliezer disagrees in this price. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, I have another pasuk that tells me that you're allowed to sell off your daughter to someone who is puzzled to her for marriage. What's the pasuk? Because it says, Imra'a be'enei adoneha, that if it is bad in the eyes of her master, to marry her. Now that's, on the simple level, just means that if the master doesn't want to marry her. But what it means on a deeper level using this drush is that if the marriage is ra'ah, if it's bad in the eyes of God, because it's a forbidden marriage, nevertheless the sale of the girl is still a valid sale. So that's how I know that you can sell an amma ha'ivriya to someone who's puzzled to her. Why then do I need the word la'ama? Melamed shemochra la'kerovim, that not only can you sell her to someone who's a mamzer, that she's not allowed to marry, but you can even sell her to a relative of hers who's an erva to her. Now what's the chiddush? That even though if he tries to marry her, there'll be no tfisas kiddushin, there'll be no marriage bichlal, because an attempted act of marriage to a girl who's an erva is not a marriage at all. Nevertheless, you could still sell her into servitude, even though marriage is not even a possibility. V'halo dinu, imocher lapsulan lo yimkarena lakrovim. So the Gemara says, why do you need an extra pasuk for that? If you can sell her to someone she's not allowed to marry, like a mamzer, why can't you also sell her to someone who's an erva to her? So no, ma'ala mocher lapsulan shimratza liyayid miyayid, yimkarena lakrovim shimratza liyayid enu miyayid. The answer is that there's a bigger chiddush, because by selling her to someone who's puzzled to her, at least if the guy does yiyud, it's a valid yiyud. She's legally married to him, even though there's a violation of the mitzvahs lo saseh, but there's at least tvisas kiddushin. By a karov, there's no possibility of yiyud whatsoever, so maybe you could have argued that it's not even possible to sell her to a relative. So amar kra la'ama melamed shemocher lakrovim. And therefore the Torah says le'ama, to tell me that not only can I sell her to someone who's puzzled to marry her, but I can even sell her to a relative of hers that marriage is not even a possibility. There's no tefisas kedushin at all. So now the Gemara just finishes by saying as follows: V'Reb Meir lapsula nafkale mehecha denafkale l'Rebbe Eliezer bakrovim. So mehecha denafkale l'Rebbe Eliezer. Now let's go back to Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir uses the word la'ama to teach me that a father can stipulate she's your servant, but you can't do yiyud. So the question now is, where does he know that you're allowed to sell your daughter to someone who's puzzled to her like a mamzer? He learns it out from Rabbi Eliezer's pasuk, Imra'a be'enei adoneha. And as far as bakrovim, how do you know that, that according to Reb Meir, what's the din as far as selling your daughter to servitude to a relative who's an erva? Sarvala kirabonan damri ein mocher lakrovim. He holds like the Chachamim, who argue with Rabbi Eliezer and say that you're not allowed to sell your daughter to someone who's an erva to her, because yiyud has to at least be a possibility. And therefore, in the final conclusion, Rabbi Meir holds as follows. He holds that the word la'ama teaches me that you can stipulate and say, I want her to be a servant to you, and you do not have rights to do yiyud. That's legal. It's not a problem of masnal mashakasu b'Torah, because the Torah makes a specific allowance for it. How do I know that you can sell an amma ha'ivriya to someone who is puzzled to her like a mamzer? That I know from the words imra'a be'enei adoneha. And what about the law? Are you allowed to sell a girl to someone who is an erva to who where marriage is not even a possibility? There's no tefisas kiddushin. According to Reb Meir, he holds like the Chachamim, who say that such a marriage is not possible, and there's no pasuk to indicate otherwise. Have a wonderful day.